what's up?
What's good, bro?
I'm good. Hold on 1 second. All right, cool. Found a quiet spot?
Yeah. It's like busy as hell around here today, so I had to search the whole school to find this place.
So where you at right now?
I'm at Savannah College of Art and Design in Atlanta.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I think I did read that, yeah. Because I went to Morehouse, you know that, right?
Oh, you went to Morehouse? Yeah, okay. Oh, okay, so you're familiar with the
yeah, so I'm in Atlanta, like, I don't make it to every homecoming now, but I get down there enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I got junior cousins actually about to start in Stonehouse this fall, so I'll probably be down there a little bit more.
Oh, shit, okay, no, that's fire. Yeah, you can definitely come down. I'm actually leaving here for the summer next week, but, I mean, yeah, if you're down here, like, next year, next fall, or whatever, yeah, we should definitely link, but...
Yeah, so we'll connect at some point.
Definitely,
sure.
No, for sure. But yeah, no, how have you been? Like, what's been going on with you lately?
Good, man. I graduated from USC Film School about a year ago, and I've just been traveling with work I did in school, writing new projects. I'm in Oakland right now. My girlfriend's from Oakland, and I've been doing some research on some projects out here, which is good, slow process, but like I work pretty slowly anyway because it's all part of a life process anyway. So I'm not really tripping about getting too many things done quickly.
Yeah.
And I've just been traveling back and forth between here and LA, just to stay connected and stay active. But I mean, otherwise, man, I can't complain. Just like getting back into the flow of life again, because film school is like a very specific kind of thing, you know. And you're there for 3 years. Well, most programs you're there for 3 years, and when you come out of it, you have to remember that like there's a world outside. You know what I mean? Like there's stuff that still needs to be taken care of if you're trying to balance it at all. Yeah. So I've done a lot of that. But it's been cool, man. Like I feel good right now. That's what I can say. Yeah.
That's all that matters. That's fine.
Yeah. It's a habitual thing though. You know what I mean? Like you have to remind yourself every day, like today's cool. But like yeah, I mean generally things have been very productive, very positive. So you know.
That's good. What kind of project are you working on? Feature? Like a feature, or you working on
feature? Actually, in about 6 weeks, I'm supposed to be filming some test footage, some like test research footage for a feature that I've been writing. I mean, the project's probably still a year off, but a friend of mine who's a cinematographer who I worked with actually on A Craftsman. Okay. We're very close, and we're supposed to actually film some stuff the end of last year, but there were some fires up in Northern California that kind of pushed everything back. So we're basically going back at it again to pick up some stuff, and circumstances have changed a little bit, but I think it'll be good for both of us, especially me, to just understand the possibilities in filming on the Northern California coast and in the countryside, and just get a sense for like the kinds of stories that can really be told out there in a very free-form way. So that'll be exciting, man. Just like getting back into it, and then otherwise, like I haven't been working on too many short-form projects, more like installation projects, not really like film projects, because yeah, I'm really just looking forward to getting this feature going. So
yeah, you're just kind of popping off.
Yeah, I mean, every so often there's like some sort of like directing mentorship or something that comes up that requires you to like consider the kinds of like shorter form work you might do. And so I'm like, all right, like, yeah, if I could tell a story in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, like this is what I would explore. But for the most part, I'm thinking about longer form projects now, just like trying to get thoughts out. So
okay, for sure. What kind of stories do you think you want to explore more as you go more into features and other types of projects? Because Craftsman, was that like would you say that was more like a story you wanted to tell, or like a story that the writer wanted to tell, or is that what did you guys kind of?
So it was kind of like it was a story. Basically, it was a story that I could find some sense of myself in. So I don't know how familiar you are with like USC specific film school process, but because it's different than the other schools. But USC works is as a director, there are pretty much two paths when I was there were two paths you could take out of the program. One was you could raise money through Kickstarter or however you get it to shoot an independent study project. And a lot of people did that if they had very specific kinds of things that they wanted to do. A lot of proof of concept projects happen that way, or just like really, really personal stories happen that way that directors didn't want the school to interfere with it at all. And that was a path. But I had done something similar to that right before school, and I didn't really want to raise a significant amount of money to make another short to graduate school. I'd rather save that kind of funding. This is the thought process. I'd rather save that kind of funding to do something after school. And so there's another path where every semester the school will fund 3 projects that are brought to them from a writer, director, producer team. And the way that works is there's a group of writers in the program. They all submit short scripts to the school. They shortlist about 30 of them. And then the school takes the directors and the producers that have done like good enough work in their minds to take a look at the scripts, figure out like if they like any of them, and pair up together to actually pitch their perspective on that story. So I found A Craftsman through that kind of process. Okay. And it was mostly because I was interested in what it might be like to direct from someone else's writing. That was something I hadn't really done. And also the funding aspect, but then there's also a third aspect to think about with USC, because the program is a feeder school for Hollywood. And the way the school is set up is pretty much how the major studios are set up. Like all the directors I know from Coogler on down who've gone into, Hollywood proper, they pretty much come through that class. And what they'll tell you time and time again is like, yeah, it's basically the same thing, except you're dealing with like more money, more professional people, so to speak. But it's pretty much like from what you do in pre-production all the way through post is basically the same thing. So I thought it would be good for me to learn that process, which you don't always get if you do it independently, because you're skipping steps a lot of times just to like save money and get stuff done. And so process was all I was concerned with. I wasn't even really thinking about the end project and like where it would go. And that fortunately, since we had a good crew and we had some aspect of the story that we were all interested in, it made it easier for us to make a project that we were proud of at the end of the day. Not without its challenges, but everything that's happened after making A Craftsman is really just like icing on the cake, because I was mostly just trying to figure out like how the system works and just trying to decide if I even wanted to deal with it. Like that was it, And now that I'm out of the program and I've had this experience and like been fortunate to meet tons of people afterwards, like I've been thinking much more about like the kinds of stories that I want to tell. And most of those stories really have to do with like it's really just my relationship to America and sort of the intergenerational dynamics of like being a Black American here in a place where you often feel homeless and you're trying to like find home in a space that's like very hostile but also in a lot of ways like very sort of culturally rich. And so I'm really interested in the way spaces are built environments. And that's what drew me to Northern California, because the landscapes and the architecture here are just, they're just amazing. And so it makes me think about like how I interact with the environment around me and what that means for like my Americanness, my Blackness, like, this whole span of conversations being had. And so the best way for me to approach it is to take like really simple characters and do character studies of people in relationships to like the environments that they're in, just to like get a sense for like how they feel in them and how they interact with them. A lot of the stories tend to revolve around like love stories, because it's a place where I think of all the things that I could speak to, it's sort of the area of life that I'm most aware of, both like romantically and also just like, maternal love, just like, platonic love through friends. It's like there are just so many ways to sort of think about like love being like a sustaining force, despite the world around you. And so the story is typically centered on some form of love in relationship to like whatever environment people are just involved in, and I'm exploring their lives and their relationships to like all of these things, with that being like the core. Yeah, man, I mean, it's giving me an opportunity to sort of think about a variety of stories that exist in sort of my purview that I could speak to very authentically. Also, I say on that point too, with love also being sort of a real centered piece. The other thing too that I'm thinking about very closely is like what, really just thinking about all of the things that I've learned through the environments that I've grown up in, like in inner city Philly, and just unlearning and relearning certain things, I mean, like breaking cycles and shit like that, and just like questioning everything to make sure that like what I'm passing on, is what I want, you to really take on, and really take forward. And so, and I think that also kind of comes back to some aspect of love and caring too. But at the end of the day, like I'm in my late 20s now, and I'm really thinking about like, well, there's a lot of stuff that's happened to me, and a lot of other people too. But like, how much of it is really true? How much of it like needs to just be left here, and how much of it can I really like do differently and expand on, so that like the world is just left better when I'm gone, or when I can't do certain things anymore, and all of those things sort of like in some way come together for me to like tell stories about just mostly like young millennials who are just like working through shit, and placing them in a space gives them an opportunity to sort of like think about all of those things that like are happening in like their current like contemporary moment, and just like allowing people to like deal with it and work through it. And I think that's the way that I've pretty much just learned how to live. And so I try and like I almost write the way that I live in some ways, Yeah. So that's cool, man. It's and that's what I think. That's also why the process can sometimes be like rather slow, because like what I'm also doing too is like if there's something that I don't know, I need to actually figure out like what it really means in real life before I write it. And so part of the writing process, or just the filmmaking process for me, is actually just living, just experiencing things. It's like very experiential, so that I'm not coming up with, because I've tried writing plenty of like especially short stories about just like these really fantastical elements, and like if they're not grounded in something that I can really hold on to, it always falls apart. So it comes back to just life, like just like experiencing it, being here, observing it, and being able to talk about it. And then like using the things like your guiding sort of pieces to like tell those things as truthfully as you can, Yeah, it's a very open process. Yeah. I have some good collaborators, so it helps. Like just stay focused.
Yeah, no, for sure. And why do you choose film to tell these stories? Have you ever explored any other?
Yeah, I mean, film. Well, film came to me through living in Europe for a while. Before I got into school, I spent a lot of time around a lot of independent filmmakers in New York, and I realized that like because I've never really been musically oriented. Like I played the drums in a jazz band way like many years ago, but like I've never really thought about myself as a musician. I've never also really thought about myself as like a great drawer, so I wouldn't really paint in like a traditional sense. But film seemed like a place where I could still like galvanize ideas and thoughts and people, and also not work alone in sort of like solitary spaces, to be able to like engage the world. And I saw independent filmmakers doing that and like working together to be able to like actually affect change. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. I just didn't know it was a career that you could go down. You know, like this was 2013 maybe, 2012, 2013, when I really started to think about what was possible to do in film. And mind you, this is prior to like Netflix really taking off, prior to Amazon, prior to like, you know, a lot of what we see now is like commonplaces, like those people didn't exist, the filmmakers weren't around, and like very prominently, you know, we were still buying Blu-rays, you know, like we weren't streaming. So my perspective on film was like whatever I saw in front of me. In New York cinema was like everybody was doing it, so I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to try it and see if I can like find a way to tell stories and through this medium. And then I just fell in love with it. And I always been watching movies anyway, but I think it's different when you're actually on the other side and you're thinking about storytelling as a filmmaker and the possibilities of like storytelling in that way. So, and then film school for me was a way to almost prove that like it was something that I really wanted to do. And it wasn't just sort of a hobby. And I think it was really successful in that way in helping me expand sort of what I believe film can do. So I just stuck to it. But I've definitely dabbled in other mediums that are sort of work in relation to film, like writing. I've done a lot of prose form writing up here in Oakland, especially in poetry and in short fiction. You know, I started playing around with sound, not necessarily music, but with sound, as a way to also evoke feeling, emotion. And
like sound design and
sound design. And it's but it always comes back to film. One because it's a gathering place for a lot of conversation and ideas right now. And you can't deny that. Like, it's a place where you can really actually see the direct impact on entire people. And in some ways, it's almost like a boundless space, because film, as we had known it 50 years ago, was like a very particular thing. It can be so many things, you know. You can make so many kinds of films. And so if you have an idea, there's a chance for you to actually explore that in some way through a moving image, you know, or not, or an image that is actually not moving, but is doing something else, but it's projected the same way that film is projected. Like, you can sort of think about so many different things, and that's for us right now, it's probably the medium of an entire generation, a couple of generations, you know, to really, like, I think we're just hitting the tip of like what film can really be. And you know, over the next probably 20 years, it'll really be defined as sort of like a new American art form, and as long as like the young creatives are like just really taking chances, like you'll see it happen the same way that music happened. Like, you know, like jazz happened for like Black musicians many decades ago. I feel like the same thing can happen with motion pictures, but it just probably won't look like motion pictures from the 1940s and 1950s. It'll be some other thing, and that's pretty fascinating. That excites me. So I'm like, you know, I'm constantly like figuring out what other people are doing and like asking questions and just exploring stuff, experimenting with stuff, because, you know, definitely keeps me alive and keeps me engaged. And like, it's proven that like the audiences are there, you know, so I'm not just guessing as to whether or not this matters. Like, it definitely does matter. So
And do you think do you think you have a specific style? Like, do you think there's a Sanford Jenkins style like what we saw in The Craftsman?
At this point, probably not. I mean, but also somebody else, like I have friends that I'm pretty close to that I've known for like at least the past 10 years. And they can see certain things in my work that reminds them of me. But anytime I go into a project, for the most part, it always feels new. There are certain things I'm definitely interested in the world. I'm definitely interested in some of the things that like we initially discussed with youth culture. I'm definitely interested in, my relationship to America. I'm definitely interested in my relationships to Blackness and Black people. I'm definitely interested in the lives of people who've like lived on the road, like migrants. I'm definitely interested in music and movement. So there are a lot of things that like in some way may show up from project to project, but the emphasis might be on one thing or another thing at any given time, because like that's what needs to be focused on to really pull out the essence of something I'm trying to explore, And in short films it's harder to say, because like every short feels like an experiment, like a very different experiment a lot of times. But if I were to have a body of work over the course of like, I don't know, let's say even 3 features, you'd probably be able to tell like, oh yeah, this is kind of something that like is definitely sticking with this person. I just don't know what that is yet. And, I'll just leave that out there for other people to sort of pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. No, I definitely agree, because I'm also a filmmaker, so I definitely feel you on that. Because yeah, I've heard people say like, "Oh, you always do this." I'm like, I do. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just like
somebody interviewed him, and they were like, because people have been picking apart his film since Moonlight came out, and he was just like, now that certain shots are so popular and like in the internet sphere of like from Barry Jenkins' films, like he's like, well, can I even my room has a dog in this house, but he's like since certain frames have become so popular, he's like, can I even do this anymore? And in his mind, someone had asked him this, and he was like, in my mind, it was never really a style, it was the way I felt something. And for me to not do it, if that is the feeling that I am trying to evoke, and that's what really comes from me naturally, it doesn't feel right, because I'm going to end up doing something that's like deliberately responding to the world in like this very reactive way, and it may not last, because then you're just constantly going to be reacting and not actually just like existing and just being and being truthful. So the less I think about like style, and the more I think about like just actually trying to feel my way through something and like doing whatever needs to be done in order to like for that like emotion to really be true to me. If it pops up time and time again, then it's like Spike's double dolly shot. I was watching BLACK-CANAL with an older person, and they were talking about how they're tired of Spike doing that shot. And I was like, what, in this film, I feel like in some ways it might have actually been like an ode to his earlier work. But in some ways, that might be the way Spike sees like certain pivotal moments in his films. That just might be like something that he can't turn off, like for him to not do that might not be true to him.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say like if he should stop doing that, but like it is something that he's known for, So,
yeah. And at the same time, if it happens naturally, then it's supposed to happen that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, because I first of all, the way I came across your work was on No Budge.
Oh, okay, yeah, Kentucky.
Yeah, it was on No. He's also in school.
Kentucky, right? I didn't know him for like many years, but I had about 3 years ago, I went to the Telluride Film Festival. If you're familiar, Telluride.
You said which one?
Telluride.
Telluride.
It's in Colorado. It's like a really small, like just like not private, but just like a really small, like festival in Colorado, but it's really important for the awards circuit because it's a place where a lot of like secret screenings happen. They don't tell you what the screenings will be until you get to Telluride. Like this happens Labor Day every year. Barry Jenkins used to program for their shorts portion of it, but their features are like the ones that basically people are tracking for like the Oscars. So it's always an interesting time, and nobody goes to Telluride, mind you, unless you really want to be there, because you can't just fly into it. You have to fly into somewhere else and like drive a couple hours. So it's not like showing up in Los Angeles or something. Yeah. So that makes it a really open atmosphere. No press, no red carpets, nothing, just film lovers. And one year I went as a student, and I was really fascinated because this is the first major festival I'd ever been to. And I had, this was about the same time that Kentucker had decided to start making those movies hats. And I had one when my hair was much shorter so I could wear hats. And I remember walking down some street, and this, who later I know is like a film programmer, he walks up to me and he was like, hey man, I don't know. He was like, where are you from? I was like, oh, we were talking about USC. And he was like, I don't know if Kentucker would like USC students wearing his hat. And I was like, why do you say that? And then No Budge comes around. I realized that like he's really like an independent filmmaker, like to the core. And USC has this reputation of like being the anti that. It's like the other side. So I was like, who am I? Like, so I had this like crisis. I'm like, am I like him or them? You know, but I reached out to him around the time that I was trying to put Craftsman online. He was like super like gracious, man, and just like chill. And so that was like that was a really good experience.
That's amazing. Yeah. And how does that make you feel now that I mentioned it about the USC, the whole USC's reputation?
It's just like, I don't know, because I never really viewed myself, even as a student, as like the typical USC student. I also wasn't trying to be the anti-USC student. I was there literally to just learn what I could about like how the system really works, so that I could do something with that info. So I didn't even think about trying to like be a part of like a group. I was just there, you know. I'm not really like into groups and movements anyway. Yeah. So I just laughed at it. I was just like, you know, I get it, because that is a really common trope. In some ways, it's actually true for some people, but there are a large contingent of people who that does not apply to, that went to school there. And I know them too. So it's like, it's just interesting, you know. Yeah.
Did you look at any other places to go, or was USC your top choice?
No, I was living in New York, so I looked at NYU and Columbia. I went to an interview at NYU. Actually, it was pretty bad. It was like it was bad in the sense that it was weird, because I was in the room with these three white guys, and they were like asking me these really like interview-esque questions. I felt really uncomfortable, and I kept thinking like, I know Spike teaches here. So it can't be that bad, but like something about the situation right now feels really off. And so I never really got into like myself, and I think it showed on some level in the interview. So later on, they told me that like they were going to waitlist me and not let me in outright, but if somebody drops, then I could get into the program. And I was like, you know, whatever. But NYU had also had like some of my favorite filmmakers come out of the program. So in some ways, I was hoping that I could just stay in New York and go to school there. But I applied to the USC, honestly, because the application was literally the same as NYU's. Yeah. Except the personal statement was slightly different. And it was in LA, and I got the advice that, like, you know, if I was going to go, this would be a good chance to, like, go and figure out if, like, LA was the place for me, or if I should be, like, elsewhere. So I applied, and then I got into that school. So I went, but... No, I definitely looked. And then Columbia, I never even heard back from. This one,
never heard back from.
But those are, yeah. So it was just, I heard back when I was like officially not in, and their class was made up, but like nothing in between. There was no correspondence at all. So I don't know what happened there. But those are the three schools, and you know, I think I missed UCLA's deadline. I was going to apply, but it was earlier than the others, so that already passed. Yeah. But you know, things work out.
And then where does Morehouse fit in?
And then Morehouse was like, Morehouse was where I went to school right before I lived in New York. That was undergrad. So it was kind of like, actually I started at Clark Atlanta because I had a tuition scholarship to go to school, and like my family couldn't afford college. So it worked for me to be there and also just be out of Philly for a little while. Just to see something else. And I had a lot of friends from Philly who were moving to Atlanta to go to all the schools around there. So it was kind of cool. But once I figured out that like I was going to be a business major, and I wanted to like find a job that like could, one, help pay off like whatever loans I did have, and also like set me up to do whatever I wanted to do next, I realized that Morehouse had the access that I would really want to have to like get those jobs. And I transferred my second semester. At the end of my second semester, I transferred to Morehouse, which I lost my tuition scholarship. So it was kind of rough actually, but I had some good friends down there. So we kind of worked it out to make sure that we all like took care of one another. And then once things started working for people through internships and other stuff, it was fine. But yeah, those are 4 of the best years of my life, because it's my first time ever being away from home, home in the sense of like where I grew up in Philly. And I just learned so much, just like being around so many Black people from so many different walks of life, really rich folks, and then some really poor down and out folks who like barely made their way into the programs. And it definitely made me like appreciate like Black people a whole lot more, because now you see all sides very clearly, as opposed to just like whatever you do from like your neighborhood. And I just like, I take that experience with me everywhere, but I've also learned a whole lot of other things about, life since I left school. Like New York, I was working in business before I became a filmmaker, and being in New York taught me certain things, and then like moving to LA taught me certain things for, film and just like industry shit. And California is just like always sunny and just the palm trees, and it's like, very different than like where I grew up. So yeah, it's definitely been a journey that I think I can track, because it's been a journey mostly of like curiosity. Me thinking about like, what is it I don't know now? What is it that I'm like trying to add to now to this life experience that that can help me like put together certain pieces. And everything that I've done, in my mind, like every major step that I've taken has been very much from that like central point of curiosity, where I just like, I'm always questioning stuff, I think someone had mentioned, there's another filmmaker who mentioned that like for the most part, like your life is basically trying to like answer the questions that you were proposed like before the age of 5 or something like that. It's like, you may not be able to articulate it at 5 years old, but there are certain things that happen to you very early on in life that like, at least for that next major phase of your life, through your early adult years, you're pretty much just like bouncing everything off of that stuff until you're like at peace with it, or you're like whole with those things. And then like, whatever you then have like made sense of gets passed down to like your children, and they have their own journey, and then sort of like, and that becomes like the cycle of like, of each generation. And so I think I'm at the point now where like, I'm definitely setting in some certain things that like I really believe about the world, and certain things that I really want to like pass down to others. And like at some point it'll be someone else's turn to sort of like really carry the world forward. But it's been cool so far, man. Just like all the experiences that I've been fortunate to have.
No, that's amazing. That's fantastic. What part of Philly are you from, by the way? I
grew up in Germantown. I don't know if you know too much about Philly, but it's like it's north of North Philly, which is a weird thing.
Okay.
But like my family is basically between North Philly and Germantown pretty much my whole life.
Okay.
And most people still live like the same place. My grandma's still in her house, so like nobody's leaving. But yeah, that's home. Yeah, everybody's still there. We were saying something earlier on No Budge though. You were talking about finding No Budge.
Oh yeah. So I was saying I was on No Budge, and because I recently heard of No Budge because somebody directed me to it. Like, oh, you should look at No Budge. I was like, oh shit. So I looked at it. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I looked at all the films on. I was like, oh, because he's very versatile with what he puts on there. But so
Yeah.
he posted The Craftsman. I was like, oh shit, this looks like right up my alley. Because like I had recently just finished a film, like literally like the day he posted it. I just finished a film that was almost like almost a similar story with not at all similar now that I think about it, but almost with a little like suicide, and it was it's like 1:1 aspect ratio, and you know, it's kind of like a dark, you know, kind of dark theme around it, but very, very meaningful at the same time. So that's right up my alley. I love films like this. Like, oh shit, this looks interesting. So I watched it. I was like, yo, who is this guy that that did this? Who is this? And then I looked deeper into it. I read the interview. I was like, oh shit, he went to USC. You know, because I wanted to go to USC at the beginning. I really that was like my number one. Well, SCAD was my number one. Then I wanted to go to USC, but I didn't get into USC. But and I was like, oh shit, this guy is fire. So I started looking deeper into it, and I saw it won a DGA award, and it went
Yeah, that was super random, but it's cool.
yeah, and then I still don't know how to say it. Camerimage.
Camerimage.
Yeah, Camerimage.
The Polish say Camerimage.
Yeah, were you able to go to any of those screenings?
Huh?
Were you able to go to any of those screenings and experience that?
Because it was my girlfriend's 30th that basically the day before. So we were in Mexico, and then I flew from there to Poland like the day after. So I got there the day after the screening, but one of my cinematographers was already there. He went to the screening. And then I spent like 5 days in Poland, basically for the rest of the festival, which was still fun. And man, that was a trip because that was the furthest I'd like ever been. And Polish, if you don't know, it's a language that's not rooted in Latin, so it's really hard to pick up words. Like you just can't. If you're from the West, you just can't. So I was lost, man. Like I tried to do a crash course in Polish, but like the way you enunciate certain words and just the inflections are just very different in the way the language is rooted. And so I was just basically just out there really just like learning what it's like to just like trying to find some common language with people. But in the film town and in Warsaw, which is, you know, a major business capital, a lot of people speak English or some form of English. So they can pick up certain words. So it wasn't as bad. Like at the restaurants, for the most part, people can pick up certain things. But yeah, if you're just like riding the train or just like walking around in like no man's land, man. But it was, you know, it was. I'm glad I went. Definitely glad I went. I had a lot of fun out there.
That's good. What was the? Did you go to the? Did you go to the DGA screening as well?
It's a DGA screening. Yes, that was actually. It was that was a couple of days before. Like a week before I went to Poland, actually.
And how were the reactions to the film?
Oh, it was beautiful, man. I had even forgotten that I had applied, because you almost do it automatically. Like every student applies to like all of the like award ceremonies and stuff. If you have a film, and I think like I want to say like it was a good like 4 or 5 months that had passed. So the summer had passed. And I didn't even remember that I had applied. And someone had called my phone from a number I didn't know. And usually I don't pick up. I'll just see, you know, for future reference. I'll let the phone ring and then I'll look up the number to know where the number's from. And just to see if it's like a bot or something. But this number linked directly back to the DGA's office. And I was like, and someone left me a voicemail like, hey, it was like very obscure, like, hey, it's so and so, if you can give me a call back, I'd love to talk to you. And I was like, all right, cool. So I called back and they were like, we just wanted to let you know that like you won the Student Film Award for this year. And I was like, for what award? like, I'm not even kidding. I was like, it wasn't even like a conceited thing. I was like, I don't, like, what award did I win? And you're just like, and then I was like, oh yeah, the Student Film Awards. And it was like, and I got really excited because I was like, oh shit, because I thought they forgot about me. I figured, like, I'm not winning. Like, I didn't make the film for those reasons. And I had basically, like, moved on from a lot of stuff from that whole process of making that film. So I wasn't even thinking about, like, awards and stuff. I was just really trying to, that was my last semester, so I was trying to graduate and figure out, like, what I was going to do after school. Mm-hmm. But when I won, it definitely made me want to share the film more in an interesting way. And so after that, and after Camerimage, which was also an entry from USC, because it's not an open festival unless you are attending a film school. Mm-hmm. So you can't just submit, like, shorts that you worked on. After those two things happened, like, back to back in November, I was like, I'm going to apply for more festivals and see where this goes. And so I basically spent all of last year, like, applying and attending some festivals and, like, traveling when I could, like, when it was financially feasible, and just, like, meeting a bunch of programmers and filmmakers and just watching stuff. And, like, my mind exploded, man, because I didn't realize, like, how talented, like, so many people are, and, like, the different ways of, like, working and thinking, because USC is, like, a certain kind of bubble, but there was, like, so much more happening in these other places. And it definitely got me excited about, like, what can be done, like, in the movies and stuff, and, like, the kinds of collaborations you can have and the kinds of ways that people can work together. And then, like, from that, I just started writing, like, new stories that, like, really felt good, that really felt true to me. And now I'm kind of basically at the tail end of, like, screenings. We have, like, a couple more, but at this point, now that the film is online and I can talk to people digitally, I don't have to travel as much, and I can just, like, focus on, like, writing new stuff and, like, getting that stuff prepared. But I don't know if the DGA didn't happen, I'm not really sure what kind of path the film would have taken. It may not have been a bad thing, but I can't imagine what I would have done had that not happened, because it triggered so many other things for me. So yeah, I'm super grateful for that whole experience.
No, that's definitely amazing. I can imagine that being, like, a huge motivator.
It was like, I was on campus too, and I was just, like, bouncing around. He's like, I'm happy. Like, yeah, it's like a random Tuesday. Why are you so happy today? And I'm like, man.
Yeah, because
like,
yeah.
I call my mom. Like.
No, that's definitely amazing. Cause it's always that feeling when you get that acceptance or whatever. You're like, oh shit, like, it's, especially something like that that's huge. Like,
yeah.
Because you're alongside Kevin Wilson Jr.
Yeah, so I met Kevin through that whole process. No, not through the DJ process. I met him at the Student Academy Awards. But, like, yeah, he won the same year on the East Coast, and I was in the West Coast branch.
Yeah.
And we eventually, like, crossed paths at festivals, and, like, we still keep in contact and stuff. But yeah, it was like, it was cool, man, to know. Yeah, it was really cool.
Is there a certain type of energy you like to keep on your sets? Like, is there a certain type of
I think for the most part, my sets are, like, really dynamic and creative. Like, one of the things, for one, it's a super safe space for everybody. Like, that's just one thing I don't play. Like, I feel like, in a sense, it's a job like any other job, and you should respect people for, like, just, like, on a basic human level. Unless somebody's really tripping, just like that drama just stays out. But at the same time, I give a lot of, pretty much all my collaborators, like, just free range to just be creative and to, like, bounce ideas and share ideas, and we just take the best ideas. And with that, and so that time, and that can create a certain kind of, like, energy, a certain sort of, like, back and forth, which is not necessarily drama. It's just, like, the way that people who are all invested in the same thing talk to each other. Mm-hmm. We're, like, really passionate about it, so there's a certain level of passion that comes across. And for me, especially if I'm directing, I'm mostly there to just listen and make sure that, like, the best ideas are being heard and they're being implemented. At least we're trying it and seeing, like, if it's possible, And so that sort of collaborative, and that's really why I went into film versus other art forms, because it gives me a chance to like actually engage people who are like a lot of times smarter than you, or like better at certain things than you are, and so you should listen to that. As a director, and I'm really there to just ground people in like what we're trying to do and what the whole purpose of it is, and if you believe in it, then like, you know, we're all gone for it. Like for instance, with Craftsman, I had to ask people to basically drive, you know, 3 to 4 hours round trip each day to shoot this movie, because we were in Los Angeles, and the only place that we could find that looked anything like rural USA was 2 hours away. And so for most students, especially, you know, like the professor said, like people are getting paid, so they don't really care, but like especially as students, they're not trying to drive 2 hours to shoot sort of film, right? Like they want to wake up, spend 10 minutes going down the street, pop this off, go back home. And so I had to, in some ways, convince people that this is going to be worthy of their time. And I also required me to like be very clear about like why we were doing it and what it meant. And then once I had buy-in from everyone, it was like, all right, you know, like 2 hours, if it takes 2.5 today because it's raining and the traffic's slow, like it's whatever, but like it's going to be worth it for, you know, when it's done. And that definitely, the whole process definitely taught me a lot about just like respecting people, but also being clear and being intentional and being like really passionate about what you believe, because that will, you know, not necessarily inspire other people, but that would definitely like rub off on other people in the way that they feel about the things that you're working on together. So, you know, it's like passion, respect, and just like full on creativity, man. Like if you ever saw us, you know, maybe one day this will actually happen, you know, like being on set, it's really just like give and take, man. Like I'm out there because I like working in spaces. I don't really pre-plan a whole lot because I feel like there's a certain feeling, a certain emotion that comes with like actually being in a place with actors, with your crew, that like gives a certain kind of energy, and you're like, all right, we'll have the actors go out and feel out the space. If there is dialogue, we'll work it out. And then from watching them in that location, I can talk to the DPs and be like, look, this is what I'm seeing, you know, and this is what they're seeing. And we're framing it up at the same time, and it's coming together in the moment. And that is what we're going to capture, you know, and it makes it like a very specific kind of film at that point, which is why I think Craftsman came together the way it did. But mind you, that was a real problem for USC, because since we weren't going into the project to just shoot a wide, a medium, and some close-ups, they couldn't really track what we were doing. And I think it frustrated a lot of the advisors that we had, because they're like, well, you won't show us a shot list. Yeah. It seems clear that, like, to all of us that, like, your team is in sync and you know what you're looking for, but, like, you won't show us a shot list. You won't give us too much detail as to, like, what this is really going to look like, because you got to, like, find it there. But, like, it did. But the one thing that we did have is that we had references for what we were working on, and we were all very clear that, like, this is the kind of story that we're trying to tell, you know. These are the things, like, we made basic, like, parameters for, like, stuff that, like, we would not do, and it helped like keep us on track, so we weren't always just like, you know, spinning our wheels on what to do next. But it did give us certain kinds of creative freedoms then that we didn't have to worry about, compared to like needing to pick up like, you know, one kind of every shot so that like the editor had everything. Like it's a waste of most people's time. So this just felt more true to life, and that's pretty much how set works for me. And then we'll see what we have at the end of the day. And if there's certain things that like we need to pick up later, then we'll try and work it into the next day if there is a next day, you know. But so, it seems to work fine so far until it doesn't work. I don't know.
Yeah. One day you're like, well, damn, I guess okay. But so you prefer to like work without a shot list, or do you like?
Pure best stuff. I work with diagrams, you know, like we'll know where we're filming for the most part. And I'll like usually have conversations with like department heads, you know, a couple of days before or so that we know like what the space looks like. We know what we're walking into. and we'll have a rough idea of what's actually possible to do in there, so we bring the right equipment. But for the most part, the way I set it up, at least for this last project, and this I actually learned this from just from some other filmmakers who whose work I really appreciate, just listening to them speak to. They'll do enough beforehand, including I also have small rehearsals with actors, so I know how they respond to me and respond to each other, so we're not wasting a lot of time. Yeah. But I leave a lot of the particulars of where the shot will start and end. Until we get on set, so we really know what that physical space is like. But we'll have the equipment, we'll have all the lights, we'll have the space decked out to where it needs to be. It'll all be there, and we just have to show up. I usually spend the first portion of it working with the actors and letting people watch, so that everyone's getting ideas about what the best capture method would really be. And at the same time, I'm probably talking to a DP okay, I like this right here, let's pick this up, because we all know what the scene's about. We've worked that out earlier in the week, and then from that point, it's just really a matter of lighting it, keeping the actors sharp so they haven't rehearsed it too much, and then just go out and do it, film it, and then kind of move on to the next thing. So there's a certain level of I have shots that are in my head that I like, but also I don't want to get too caught up in trying to do that thing if it doesn't feel like that thing is really true to what people are doing in that space. And it's just I'm forcing it at that point because it looks cool, or because I've seen my favorite filmmaker do it. Yeah. But if it's if it doesn't apply here, just don't do it. You gotta scrap it and have a certain, so you have to have a certain philosophy that guides you all the time. If you haven't read, it's kind of a side, but the two books that I found really helpful, a lot of books now, but the two books in film school that I found really helpful, one was Michelangelo Antonioni's book, The Architecture of Vision. And then that was really the one. And then there was another book, which later was more helpful, Andrei Tchaikovsky's Sculpting in Time. But Antonioni's book, I think, was really helpful for working with actors and setting up space, because he really talks about the importance of knowing where you're going to be and preparing people for that space, but not over preparing, so that you can still be excited about showing up and being there and finding stuff. And it's the finding that you're really there for,
Exactly.
And as long as it's not if it's film, if it's television, then you might have to work a little differently, because they expect certain modes of television, certain things are done very specifically. But in independent film, you can have a different working style. It'll be fine.
Do you have any specific directors or filmmaker or filmmakers you look up to who inspire you the most?
In film, I mean, lately, I'd say, because it kind of, I'd say I tend to go back to Antonioni's guiding principles a lot, only because, I'm not making films the way he makes films, but I do appreciate how he really seems to understand that your films are very much a reflection of the cycle of life that you're in at that time, and it keeps you from getting stuck in doing certain things a certain way all the time. When you're 20, when you're 20 versus 24 versus 28, your life is probably drastically different in what what you're interested in. And that also changes the way you see things. And that may change the way that you frame up. And so I'm very much aware now that what I'm thinking about now in terms of favorite filmmakers is probably pretty much a reflection of what's going on in my life at this moment. And I think at this moment, I've been watching a lot of film from Eastern filmmakers, I'd say, or people who are non-Western filmmakers. So that includes African filmmakers, as well as a lot of Asian filmmakers. Edward Yang comes to mind as someone who, I don't know if you know Edward Yang at all, but he...
I think I was just talking about him with Chad the other day. He did.
Okay.
Did he do Yi?
He did Yi, yeah.
Okay.
and a bunch of other films that I love too. But I think he seems to have a really good sense of like how to place someone in relation to like the world that they're in, the spaces. Like his work is very architectural in a way that like I think about sometimes, and that to me has been like really profound, and like seeing what's possible for his world in Taiwan. Like that's what he sees, you know. But like my world here is a little different, so. You know, the philosophy may stay, but like the shots may be different. And so that's like, but his work has been really important to me. And there are some other makers from Japan and from certain parts of Eastern Europe too that have also been really influential in a lot of ways. But I think it comes back to Yang really as a filmmaker, as somebody who just trips me up, and like how sound he seemed to be with like what he wanted to say. It was like a very specific thing, you know, and like a very specific sort of lasting thing. And like architecture, it was something that was built so well that like it still stands, you know, as opposed to being like, you know, in the moment, like pop cultural. But yeah, I mean that might in 3 years from now, I'll probably be like really studying someone else a lot closer. And I'm okay with that, you know, because I feel like there's just always something to learn at any given point that you're at. Like you're going to be looking for something else that like helps fill in a certain gap, and like you may find it in someone that's been around this whole time, but like you just didn't really have the time, so to speak, to focus on that thing at that time. But yeah, I think that's where I am right now. And then also I think there are a lot of short form filmmakers that are really inspiring right now. And so I think at some point when those filmmakers start making features, if they want to, especially in America, like I think we're really in for like a new wave in a good way, you know, that like really changes what film can be, you know, and how it's produced and distributed. So that like really gets me excited. But yeah, I don't know what the last movie I watched wouldn't be helpful for you actually. I was watching Suspiria just because it was. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh yes. Wait, the new one or the old one?
The new one. I was watching the new one. Yeah.
Did you like it?
Version. Yeah. But it just came across my screen, and I was looking for something to watch last night, so I watched that.
Are you a fan of Luca Guadagnino?
I do like Luca. I don't know that I like that film as much as I like some of his other films, but yeah, I just like movies, man. Like I've gone through various periods of like film watching, from like new wave watching to like American indie watching to like blockbusters watching to like the whole like Hitchcock like golden age watching to you know, when everybody was watching Wong Kar-wai, I was like really watching Wong Kar-wai, and like you know, I think now I'm just sort of like finding filmmakers who are sort of working in these sort of like architectural spaces, doing like character studies on people that are like, it's like slow cinema, you know, that's really just taking the time to like dissect the world that they live in these really interesting ways. And I think he's definitely, Naomi Kawase, the Japanese filmmaker, she's another person who's like in that space too. Yeah, it's someone had written an article that Craftsman reminded them of Ozu's films. I like Ozu, but yeah, I never really got into his films too closely. But yeah, again, a lot of this stuff comes from like an Eastern way of working, because it's very like, it's kind of slowed down, zenned out. It's like basically like picking apart certain things, like so you can really like hold on to them and understand what's happening. I think that's kind of where I am right now, since I'm trying to digest so much.
Yeah.
You know, Tarkovsky to some degree. But you know, all these filmmakers are working in China, Japan, Taiwan, Russia, Poland. You know, places really far away from here, so they have less influence by here. and so that allows me to see them in like a, you know, something that feels very different than like what is here. You know, it sort of expands your ideas of what's possible in a lot of ways. I've been catching up on all of Burnett's work too.
A lot of what?
Charles Burnett.
Oh,
like
okay.
Black filmmakers who's like the Black indie filmmakers, basically before Spike, whose work just pretty much went unseen because they couldn't find distribution. I've been finding a lot of that stuff too. It's been really interesting to see.
Just haven't had time to really sit down and watch as much as I want to, as much as I used to. But this summer, I'm definitely gonna.
Yeah, Criterion definitely helps. You know, catch up on a lot of stuff. You know, before that, I was watching a lot of stuff through Mubi and then through Filmstruck before it shut down. So
yes,
I've been catching up on a lot of films. Yeah.
Anything on Criterion you recommend?
On Criterion, I would say, I would definitely say check out Charles Burnett's work. His most popular work, Killer Sheep, isn't on there, which is odd, even though Criterion has definitely restored that film, but some of his other films are there. And it's just interesting to see like what he was able to do with no money, to be able to still tell these like really rich like Black American stories in like ways that look nothing like the work that comes out of Hollywood. It's just like a very like other kind of way of like approaching film. And then let's see. I think a lot of Tarkovsky's work is there now.
Oh yes, also love him.
I've been watching on there. Check out Scorsese's World Cinema Project. Actually, you know what? You know who I've been really addicted to lately? Do you know Apichatpong?
Who?
A filmmaker, Apichatpong. He's a Thai filmmaker. He won the Palme d'Or back in like 2010 for this movie called Uncle Boomy, Who Can Recall His Past Lives. But he work.
Uncle Boonmee?
Uncle Boonmee. Boonmee. Uncle Boonmee, yeah. So look him up. I think only one of his films is on Criterion now, but he has some stuff on YouTube, and then I think you can find his other work on like other websites too.
Okay.
But he works in a way that really inspires me because it's like a fusion of reality and fantasy in a way that like really feels grounded. It doesn't feel otherworldly, and it feels like he's finding a way to articulate emotions in a way that like don't go into the surreal too far. Definitely not things that like you would actually see with your naked eye. And I think it's interesting the way that like he approaches his work, and he completely works outside the studio system, but he's been successful in that. And you know, also, you know, he's a Thai, so he's, you know, on the eastern side of things. But he has a film. His first feature is on there. I actually just watched it recently because I couldn't find it anywhere. It's called Mysterious Object at Noon. Mysterious Object at Noon. That's on Criterion now. You can check that out.
Okay, bet.
But yeah, man, that's just I've been finding filmmakers one-off that like that just do something that just remind me of like the beauty of this medium and just the beauty of the world, and just like it makes you want to be like not only a better filmmaker but just a better person.
Yeah.
Because you know, from very different worlds, but like they still find something to connect. You know, some way to connect with you.
No, for sure.
And it's cool.